In Pokemon Unite, there are 5 roles that Pokemon are classified into: attacker, speedster, all-rounder, support, and defender. But in general, there are 2 main archetypes of these roles, and that is carry and supporter. Now, being a carry is often the most attractive role to many players, and I already did an analysis in a previous video that basically proves this, but in general, people want to do a ton of damage and get a ton of KOs, but playing as a carry is perhaps the most complicated role in terms of the variety of goals a carry has to reach to be effective. Being a supporter or a tank player involves ensuring that your carry reaches their highest potential, so you're often not doing the damage or getting the KOs, but you might be healing your allies, setting up insane plays, and getting vision, for example. And you know what? Players just suck at it. Hi everyone, my name is Husky, and before I jump into this video, I just want to say thank you so much for the recent support on my channel. I had the idea to do these kinds of videos because research is what my niche is, and I think that that's been a topic that has been unfulfilled in the community so far. So I want to continue doing videos like this with more deep dives that take a lot of work and a ton of research, but I can't say I will for sure have a certain number of videos per month and such, but I'm going to be doing this as much as I can. Again, let me know if you have any topics that you want me to cover on game psych or just deep dive content and stuff like that. This has been fun so far. Thank you again for all the support. Today we will be deep diving into what each of the roles do in Unite, and more specifically, what it might say about you. Unite has a unique play style compared to other MOBAs. There are 3 roles that are considered carries in some capacity, and that is the attacker, speedster, and all-rounder roles. If we translate this into an actual game, your ideal stack would consist of a defender and a support with an EXP share, 1 carry in each lane to receive the benefits of the EXP share, and the jungler. So let's talk about each of those carry positions now in depth. So the top lane carry is competitively usually an all-rounder, but can also be a strong laning Pokemon, most often melee. The top laner has a strong secure move and is usually stacking an attack weight, so the goal is to stack the attack weight as much as possible in the early game to get ahead. Secure farm, stack, repeat, until the mid-game begins. When this does happen, at least in competitive play, the top lane Pokemon may become an off-laner depending on their need for more stacks. In an off-lane, the job is not to fight with the enemy, but to secure farm and score goals. If the entire team rotates top for Regieleki, the top laner might rotate bottom to stack and farm. If the entire team rotates bottom, the top laner might stay top to stack and farm. As soon as the top laner secures their Unite move and has a sufficient amount of stacks, they join the team and look for opportunities to be a frontline carry, which means standing in front of their team or with their defender or support to try to grab enemies. The bottom lane carry is most often a ranged attacker with a strong laning phase, something that gets online early and can put consistent pressure on the enemy team. Like the top lane Pokemon, it should have a strong secure move in most cases, but its goal is not to use a stacking item. Instead, they focus on securing farm and poking out the enemy defender, who is often trying to stack, building up their level, and standing behind their EXP shareholder. This Pokemon is usually at the first objective and makes rotations with the team. Since they're usually squishy, they aren't often expected to defend a goal on their own, but they may be placed alone in certain situations to get vision on the enemies if the team doesn't know where they are. They are expected to take the least damage on the team because they should be behind their defender and support at all times, doing range damage. Now let's take a look at the roster, and I'll show you which Pokemon can and should take the laning carry roles. This can be up to interpretation, as obviously ordered by role, so not in order of best to worst at all, but this is the simplest list possible, and it assumes that there is an EXP share with you in lane. Otherwise, some of the niche picks become a do not play because they're too hungry for experience. What you'll notice on this list is that most things can work given the right situation, except some supports that just aren't built to do enough damage to be a carry. Even Clefable has a niche use case for its Draining Kiss build. This role is more about positioning and rotations than it is about the exact Pokemon you choose for it. The Central Area Pokemon, or Jungler, is thought of as the most crucial role in the game. They have free, safe farm that provides them with an easy level 5 after their first rotation, and is on a respawn timer of 1 minute. They also receive 2 very substantial buffs, known as the red buff and the blue buff, which I'll talk about in a minute. The universal rule is that the Jungler should be the star of the show, the Pokemon who gets the most experience and the most KOs and the most damage, and the rest of the team should be backing them up. Without a strong Jungler, the team is at a huge disadvantage. The Jungler has to balance farming with fighting in a more deliberate way than the lane carries. They're expected to clear jungle every minute and constantly be assessing the map on a macro level to decide when and where fights will begin. At the start of the game, they clear jungle and pick a lane to head to, then head back to jungle, decide if they will head to another lane, or head to the mid birds. Then they decide which lane they will try to win before the first objective starts, all while managing when to farm their buffs and maintain the highest level in the game. Or at least that's what they should be doing. Let's break it down a little bit further, starting with what the jungle looks like and the buffs it gives you. So the red buff, or Escavalier, gives you the buff of basic attacks dealing extra damage and decreases the movement speed of opposing Pokemon for a short time. The blue buff, Aselgor, grants a buff that reduces the cooldowns of your Pokemon's moves by 10%. The Xatu only spawns at the start of each game and is the first piece of farm available for the jungler. After that, 2 Baltoys spawn that give less experience but are still crucial to reaching level 5 before the first gank. The Baltoys and buffs spawn at 9:45 and then go on a 1-minute cooldown after they are defeated. It's important to know when they'll be coming back up so that you can be ready to farm them again. There are a few different rotations you can make through the jungle, and it often depends on the Pokemon you're playing and what lane you plan to go to. So you can do buff, Baltoy, Baltoy lane. You can do buff, Baltoy, buff, Baltoy lane. There's a lot of different options for how you can decide to clear your jungle. The other important thing to note is that the amount of EXP gained is determined by when the farm is KO'd, and is also relative to when the opposing team's jungler KO'd it. So if you're playing a Pokemon that evolves at level 4, like Leafeon, it can be better to wait to KO the Xatu until 9:45 to give you a better chance of hitting level 4 after clearing only the first buff, which really speeds up the rest of your jungle clear. But generally this doesn't matter too much for most Pokemon. Let's talk more about the buffs specifically. So a basic attack focused Pokemon is going to be better with a red buff because of the extra damage dealt and slow on basic attacks. If you're playing a mage who uses mainly moves rather than basic attacks and you're playing jungle, it can be better to give up the red buff after your first few rotations to a Pokemon who can really benefit from it. A mage is better with the blue buff because it reduces their move cooldowns and they're focused on using moves. So if you're playing a basic attacker, it could be better to hand the blue buff over after the first few rotations. When you KO an enemy that has a red buff or a blue buff activated, you'll gain those buffs for yourself. So they also start their cooldown over. So after KOing a Pokemon with buffs, you'll have the buffs for an entire minute after, even if they only had 5 seconds left on their timer. I would say overall the blue buff could be more of a game changer late game, and red buff can be a game changer early game. Sending a basic attacker to lane with a red buff early can prevent the enemy from being able to get back to their goal zone because of how much they're slowed, making it easier to force them into a fight. But the blue buff, however, is extremely helpful for very specific Pokemon. For example, Icy Wind Glaceon needs blue buff to be able to keep its Icicle Spears up, and Mystical Fire Delphox needs it to basically be able to reset its moves on a hit. This also means that you can walk into the enemy jungle and take one or both of their buffs, and if you do that, that's huge for preventing them huge amounts of experience and the benefits the buffs provide. Alright, let's talk about our tier list here. Once again, it's pretty simple. Some Pokemon absolutely can't be run in jungle, some can but aren't exactly recommended, and most are fine. But this one definitely has more no-nos. I would say defenders and supports generally can't be run in the jungle. Yes, I've seen them here and there, but there are too many Pokemon that should be getting all that experience that need it more. And then there's Gyarados. Please don't run this thing in jungle. It takes more than 2 minutes to clear. Some things are obviously better than others, like Blaziken can be put in jungle and it has a good gank, but if you have Dragapult on your team, then just let them have it instead. Stuff like that. But generally this is the simplest way that I can put it. Most Pokemon can be run in jungle, but some Pokemon are better than others. Your support and tank roles are those that are run with the EXP share. Play EXP share. Please. It's broken. These characters are strictly played in lane, or in some cases roamers or invaders relying on the EXP share to grant them passive EXP. These Pokemon are here to make sure the carries get fed. They're typically not alone on the map unless they're taking that roamer harassing role. And they don't farm on their own, and they usually have a lot of CC to help set up big plays for the carries to make. They make rotations with the team and are the role responsible for getting vision of the enemy team so the carries know how to engage. They stand in front of carries and absorb damage, they heal in some cases, and look to catch out weak enemy Pokemon. It's a very complicated role and requires a lot of macro skill, but unfortunately in uncoordinated play, these characters are hardly ever the ones calling the shots because they can't win a fight on their own. Or at least they're not supposed to. Let's look at our list here, and if anything's going to ruffle some feathers, I feel like this one might. Again, it's pretty simple. Defenders and supporters are designed to be like this, but there are a couple of niche picks that can work as supporter defenders. For example, Pikachu can be played as a support with Volt Tackle, Mewtwo X can be played as a tank. I've seen Submission Machamp with EXP share win a tournament. Maybe there is some more examples that I've put in the do not play category that people could convince me can be played as a tank or support. But in general, here you go. Have at it in the comments to yell at me for whatever I've done with this. Now let's move on to our fun part, the research. What does your role say about you? In one paper, the carry role is defined as the role that bears the team's expectation towards a victory. Those who choose the carry role are often expected to gradually become the strongest and unstoppable member of the team due to the advantages it is given. One master's thesis explored the personality traits of players who prefer different roles in MOBA games and found evidence to suggest that people with a tendency to be more introverted and agreeable tend to play more support-focused roles, and individuals with carry roles tend to be more extroverted, but specifically in the areas of assertive, dominant, and excitement-seeking. They suggested that carry players may feel this way because they have a need to be recognized as competent, which may be fulfilled when they're the player getting the most damage or kills on the team. Another paper described that the leadership style of players is positively correlated with their chosen role. More specifically, carry players tend to have a more authoritarian leadership style, where they're focused on making decisions that benefit themselves so they grow stronger than the rest of the team and are able to bring them to victory. They're task-oriented and make decisions that the entire team is supposed to go along with. And this does actually relate to their real life, where the players themselves are behaving in more authoritarian ways in their real lives. In fact, this increases over time. As players gain gaming experience, they behave more authoritatively in leadership positions in the game and in their real life. On the opposite end, support roles tend to be more democratic in their leadership style, both in-game and in real life. This means they prioritize leading by what a majority of the group wants. They put their trust in the team to make the right decisions. However, the interesting thing about players who play support excessively is that they tend to display both authoritarian and democratic leadership styles. So I think it may just be that mobile players tend to have this tendency to feel that they're making the correct decisions, which if you're interested in that a little bit more, go check out my previous video on the player base. So what does this all mean? This means that carry players know they have the most important role in the game and make decisions based on the idea that them getting fed is the most important thing. Based on their personality traits as well, of being more dominant and assertive, and this is just me making an inference, they may be more protective of the decisions they make and expect that the team will go along with their plays, or that the team should go along with their plays. To me, this may explain why we see so many carry players refusing to learn how to be better because they think they're already the best. As for supports and tanks, they're built on trust and loyalty and make decisions based on how to get your team to victory. In my inference and my personal experience, I feel like I see way more support and tank mains being willing to improve. They have better overall macro skills and have a greater variety of Pokemon that they play. But that's also because of how Unite is designed. The carry role is just way more attractive. But what about fills? You're probably sitting on the other side of the screen being like, but what about me? I do it all. I play whatever the team needs. I don't even know which role I like the best. Well, let's talk about you then. You are mentally ill. You have trouble making decisions at all, you're afraid of failing, being perceived as a nightmare to you, and yet you crave validation. None of that has anything to do with research, that's just my personal opinion. Unfortunately, research doesn't really talk about versatile players because Unite is very different from other MOBAs. Being a 10-minute game, it gives you the opportunity to play more games and try out more characters, so players may be more likely to be proficient in multiple roles. I still think players generally lean towards specific play styles, but there could be different things associated with fill players that research just hasn't looked at yet. The one master's thesis I talked about earlier did an exploration of different MOBA roles with the Big Five personalities, so I want to go over that here because personality tests are my favorite thing ever. If you're unfamiliar, the Big Five personalities are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. I've taken plenty of Big Five tests and I'm always highly neurotic and it's always highly embarrassing. Carries are associated with high extroversion and openness, while supports and tanks are associated mainly with high agreeableness. Isn't that fun? It kind of makes sense if you know players who play these roles, I feel like. I decided to dive a little deeper on this, especially because there's so much research out there on the Big Five personalities, and I think this is interesting. Women have been shown to always score higher on agreeableness, and men tend to score higher in certain areas of openness, like coming up with new ideas, and specific areas of extroversion, like assertiveness. It's just interesting to me that the personality traits line up like this, and that research shows that women are more likely to play support-focused roles if they do play games in this genre. Does that mean that women just want to be playing support? Maybe. Or perhaps, if we combine the literature to make deeper inferences, it could mean that women being traditionally unwelcome in gaming spaces forces them into roles that society decided fits their personality. And they may do this just to attempt to avoid harassment. Just a thought. As always, all references are in the description. Please let me know what type of content you'd like to see from me, and I will see you all next time. Bye!